Good morning to the Rosenort School community, and welcome to our virtual Remembrance Day service. Before we get started, we would like to thank all of the students and staff who contributed to today's service. Let's get started with the playing of O Canada. Please rise.
Welcome RedHawk Nation to the grade 5-6A interview with Anne Frank. We are reading the book The Diary of Anne Frank as part of our ELA autobiography unit. Anne Frank is a 13-year-old Jewish girl hiding during World War II in Nazi Germany. Logan is going to ask Anne a few questions and Isaiah is going to answer them.
Question 1. How did you feel having to hide out in a secret part of an old house for most of the war?
For the most of the war, I was scared to be found, but other times we were able to have a bit of fun by reading, learning, and listening to the radio.
Were you mad about having to hide because you were Jewish?
I was mad and confused because I did not understand why I was different than others.
Did you think yourself lucky for having a safe place to hide?
Yes, I was able because I was able to survive and live the rest of my life happily.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow.
Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly. Scares heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who died, we shall not sleep though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
The kindergarten class spent some time reading books about Remembrance Day and then also talked about what peace means to each of them. These are some of their answers. Peace is
helping somebody, watching something good, watching the snowfall, family.
Peace is
Flower growing, liking balloons and pizza and drinking. Snow. My family.
Peace is your family.
Keeping the water clean. Eating bubble gum. Eating ice cream. Peace is helpful.
Helping.
Peace is pizza.
Good morning, RedHawks Nation. You're about to see a performance of One Tin Soldier, originally performed by the original cast and here performed by a grade 7 and 8 small ensemble. Now, before we begin, the lyrics contained therein need a little bit of an explanation. You're about to hear lines like, go ahead and hate a neighbor, go ahead and cheat a friend. And that can be really confusing considering the message of Remembrance Day and the idea of looking for peace. This song, written long, long ago, was an anti-war song, and the people singing it were being very critical of the climate that they were in. And so when you hear those lines in the chorus, they are challenging. What is it really all about? Why do people continue to go to war? Why are there conflicts between neighbors? And the line following says, do it in the name of heaven, and you'll be justified in the end. And one more time, the idea is that that's not exactly an endorsement, but rather we have to think about why we think it's okay to mistreat people, or why it's okay that we are judging people, even today, doing the things that we know we shouldn't be doing. So enjoy this rendition of One Tin Soldier, and remember that we're here to promote peace, and we are challenging why we have conflict at all in the first place. Thank you.
On this Remembrance Day, I'd like to share with you the story of my grandfather, Arthur W. Sansom, who was captured by German forces during the raid on Dieppe. At the age of 16, my grandfather enlisted in the Canadian Army. 16-year-olds, as you can imagine, were not allowed to enlist. so my grandpa lied and told the enlisting officers that he was 19. After arriving in England, he completed some basic training, and then his secret about his age came to light. They were going to ship Grandpa home. Well, he wanted to help in the war effort, and so he snuck off and jumped onto a ship heading for Dieppe. We don't have very many details about my grandfather running away and how he ended up on a ship to Dieppe. My grandpa, like so many soldiers, did not like to talk about his time in the war. However, we know that he wanted to serve his country, no matter the consequence, and he definitely was going to have that chance as he sailed to Dieppe. For those of you who don't know, the raid on Dieppe began on the morning of August 19th, 1942. You see, at this time in the war, the German forces had occupied most of Europe, and the Canadian government was itching to get involved in the war. And so they sent 4,963 Canadian troops to Dieppe. The operation was called Jubilee, and it was designed to test the Allies' ability to launch amphibious attacks. The Allied forces planned to attack at 5 different points on a front that was roughly 16 kilometers long. However, as they made their way to the French coast, they were met by a small German convoy. There was a violent attack which tipped off the Germans holding the front line on land. So when the Allied forces finally made it to the beach, the German soldiers were ready and waiting for our troops. My grandpa's regiment, the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders, attacked the western flank of the beach, also known as the Green Beach. They were there to support the South Saskatchewan Regiment. Although most of the beach was attacked with little to no surprise, the initial opposition on the Green Beach was light. However, that resistance intensified as the Canadian soldiers made their way further inland. After heavy fighting, our troops were forced to withdraw. Most troops were able to make it back to the landing craft, though many of the men were wounded. The landing craft was then forced to surrender due to the onslaught by the German forces, and due to the fact that they ran out of ammunition. Other Canadian soldiers perished during the attack. The total Canadian fatalities at Dieppe was 916. The total fatalities from my grandpa's regiment was 76. Other soldiers, like my grandfather, were captured by the Germans. A total of 1,946 Canadian troops were taken as prisoners of war. When my grandpa was captured, his parents were notified by letter that he was missing in action. On September 16, 1942, the Winnipeg Tribune listed my grandfather as one of the Manitoba and Saskatchewan men listed as missing in action. On September 18, 1942, my great-grandparents received a letter from McFadyen Company Limited, which I believe was an insurance company that was quite large at the time. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Sansom, in the newspaper the other evening, I noticed that your son was among those listed as missing at Dieppe, and I wish to extend to you my sympathy in this period of worrying that you must be going through, waiting for more news of him. I do hope that you may hear soon that he is safe and unwounded, and that when the war is over, he will return to you safe and sound. It is very difficult to express in words just what I would like to say to you, but being the stalwart people you are, I know you will bear your burden with the proud courage of parents that have such brave sons. Sincerely, C. McFadyen. So what I've heard from various family members is that after my grandpa was captured in Dieppe, France, he was forced to walk to the camp, which was called Stalag 8B. The camp was located near the village of Lambsdorff in western Poland, which is approximately 1,321 kilometers away. It would take about 11 days by foot. My grandfather had recounted a bit of this experience to my mom, and he had told her that if any of the prisoners who were walking, if they were sick or if they were too slow, anything of that nature, they were either left on the side of the road to die or they were shot. So a scary situation for a 16-year-old, that's for sure. While in the camp, the prisoners were sent Red Cross parcels that could contain various items like foodstuffs or entertainment items like a deck of cards, something for them to do. These packages were often lost in transit, and they were also often stolen by German guards. But when they were lucky enough to get a parcel, they were overjoyed. You see, the men who fought and served for our country were treated very poorly in the camp. They were beaten for minor offenses like laughing. In October of 1942, the Germans would take the strings from the Red Cross packages and they tied up the soldiers' hands. And then in December of 1942, they switched from the string to handcuffs that were attached by a 1-foot chain. And that's how the soldiers had to live. That did change eventually, but it was not fun, I'm sure, while they went through that. They would also have their food rations withheld if they showed any sort of defiance. And those food rations were very important to the soldiers because they didn't get fed a lot. Most of them were starving, losing tons and tons of weight, and very malnourished. I heard stories from my family that my grandfather and I guess his bunkmates would catch rats and would kill them and cook them up to eat so that they would have some kind of protein to keep them going. And so the prisoners looked forward to receiving their Red Cross parcels. In one such parcel, my grandpa, prisoner of war number 26801, received a journal. He never wrote in the journal, but it looks as though he passed it around his camp or bunk. In the journal, there are a couple drawings depicting the various hopes of escape. The prisoners often tried to dig tunnels as a way to escape. You can see in this picture a foiled attempt. This next drawing seems to show the prisoners fashioning a boat to escape from pieces of their Red Cross parcels. Here's another image that it looks like the same prisoner drew while he was in the camp. And finally, a depiction of their true captor, Adolf Hitler. There were also a few poems written by the POWs that were in the journal. The first one I'll share with you is called Lest We Forget. It was on the 18th day of August, 1942. We sailed from merry England, and no man knew where to. We had received no orders, no one to see us leave. The 2nd Canadian Division, with the blue patch on their sleeve. Early the next morning, when everything was still, we saw those tracer bullets coming at us from the hill. But we kept on sailing, and no man will forget the morning that we landed on the beach there at Dieppe. The enemy were waiting and had taken up their post. We met a hail of bullets as we landed on the coast. But every man there landed, or at least he tried, though many of them were wounded and many more had died. It was early in the morning when we started into fight. The mortar bombs came at us from the front and left and right. They shelled us from the cliff and bombed us from the air, but the 2nd Canadian Division were not so easy to scare. We fought them for 9 hours, 6 till 3 p.m. Our losses were terrific, but there was nothing we could do. The Navy came to help us, but their boats they could not land, so we had to surrender at Dieppe, there on the sand. What is left of us is prisoners beneath a foreign flag, here in the heat of Germany in a camp 8B Stalag. Many of our comrades fell, but we never will forget. They gave their life there fighting in the Battle of Dieppe. When this war is over and once again we're free, to our homeland we will be sailing, which is far across the sea. Though many have a battle scar, there's not one that shall forget the morning that we landed on the French coast of Dieppe. Here's another entry called A Soldier's Prayer. Our Father, who art in Canada, Mackenzie King be thy name. Thy will be some in Toronto as in Ottawa. Give us our day, our deferred pay, and forgive us our AWOL, as we forgive everyone except the Canadian Provost. Lead us not into the Army Reserve, and give us bond negotiable with interest. Forever and ever, amen. This poem is called Buggered by Wire. It was the 8th day of October, they tied up our hands, reprisals for killing back there on the sands. How we hate this old prisoners and wish we were free from behind this barbed wire of Stalag 8B. Winter has come to this dark, dirty hole. There isn't much heat in our ration of coal. We think of our homes far over the sea and plan our escape from Stalag 8B. The boys are quite cheerful and say with a grin, it soon shall be over and we're damn sure to win. When spring rolls around, we soon will see and forget all nightmares of Stalag 8B. Xmas is coming and we'll hope for the best. The Allies will come from the east and the west. The big guns will thunder and we shall be free and just have memories of Stalag 8B. This last poem is called Prisoner of War, and unfortunately in one of the stanzas I can't read some of the writing, and so I'm just going to skip that stanza, but I'll read the rest to you. Prisoner of War. Now we are prisoners from a little town in France, and I think we would still be fighting if we had an even chance. How well I remember that march through Dieppe town. The Jerry did his worst, but he couldn't get us down. They kept us 9 days more, then they marched us to the station. 40 men to one boxcar, Deutschland was our destination. The things that happened on the train would take a month to tell. No food, water, or lavatories, just 4 days of hell. One awful week of traveling, then one day we could see what looked like the gates of paradise. It was the gates of Stalag 8B. The Tommies met us at the gate with cigarettes in their hands. A Canadian showed us in the way. Life scarcely seemed grand. In the journal that my grandfather kept while he was a prisoner of war, there are also many autographs, names, and addresses of soldiers and their families. This I imagine to be a record of my grandpa's friends, who he relied on and who he supported during his time in the camp. Then, on February 10th, 1943, the Winnipeg Tribune listed my grandpa as a prisoner of war. He wouldn't be freed for another 2 years. Finally, on September 26th, 1945, my great-grandparents received a letter from the Canadian Prisoners of War Relatives Association announcing that my grandpa, Arthur Sansom, was free and safe. I am sure my grandpa learned a lot about war, friendship, family, and life while he was in the camp. He was captured at 16, still only a child, and came home as a 19-year-old man. On his return home, he made sure to bring with him the journal, which I have already shared with you, as well as this German dagger. The inscription translates to, "All for Germany." The story is that my grandpa took this dagger off a dead German soldier as he was being freed. So over the years, my grandpa received his war medals. So I'll read them off to you from left to right. The first one is the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders pin. Then we have the 1939 to 1945 star. Then we have the France and Germany star. Then the Defense Medal, the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal, the War Medal, the 1942 to 72 30th Anniversary of Dieppe Medal, the Dieppe Bar, and then the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders pin. Tomorrow, on November 11th, please take time to remember all of the men and women who fight for us and who have fought for us, including my grandpa, Arthur Sansom, of the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders.
Thank you, Ms. Sansom, for sharing your grandfather's story with us. This concludes our Remembrance Day service. Please take some time tomorrow to remember our veterans.